Go for it. Hi again, Robyn. It's good to be back with you. Uh, and good to be back with all of you too. Thanks very much for tuning in. The what I'm thinking right now for this episode, Robyn, and it's something that's been on my mind for a while. I wanted to talk about it because the V of our podcast name is vulnerability. And vulnerability perhaps means something different to all of us. So let's kind of start off this episode by unpacking that word vulnerability. Uh, and if you were to start this time, Robyn, what does vulnerability mean for you? And what environment, what space do you require in order to be comfortable with vulnerability?
Great. So, um, I think for a very long time, because of my background, I grew up in Northern Ireland in Belfast during the Troubles, and I was from the Catholic side of the debate, the argument, the situation, and therefore in the minority. And I was actually on the street we lived, we were the only Catholic family. So there was, and at the time, there was a lot of careless talk costs lives propaganda going
Mm.
around, literally like on the news and so on. And I think that left me feeling rather vulnerable. And it left me feeling like it was dangerous for me to speak up. And in fact, I used to get, when I kind of realized what was going on when I was a small child, I didn't know what was going on. I wasn't aware at all. And then when I started to get a deeper understanding and realization, I was, why are people fighting? We're all just human beings. We're all just living in this place. Why can't we get along? And my mum used to tell me to be quiet because she worked in a hospital and she would see people having been kneecapped because she took the x-rays of the knees. So she would say, keep quiet, keep quiet. So I think I felt very vulnerable growing up, and that led me to shutting down and being quiet. But I've now learned that for me, it's about feeling safe.
Mm.
So for me to be vulnerable, I need to feel like I'm in a safe space. There needs to be an element of trust. If I'm being vulnerable with someone else, I need to be able to trust them, at least to a certain degree. I need to know that if I say something to them, they're not going to ridicule it, they're not going to dismiss it, they're going to listen. They're going to give me the space to say what it is and how it is for me,
So it's
with
that
the
lack of
understanding that we're all
judgment.
different.
It's
Yes.
that lack of judgment, which I think is really important. And I think I'd say the same. Uh, I've had a different experience, as you would expect. Uh, so I feel very much, when you mention what was going on in Northern Ireland and how that made you environmentally, it made you feel vulnerable. And then you went on and talked very nicely about how uh, then you internalize that sense of vulnerability and said, okay, when can I be vulnerable? When is it safe for me to be vulnerable? I'd like to unpack that a little bit for me now because vulnerability for me, uh, and again, I guess it's a function of my kind of background and upbringing. Vulnerability, it was almost the same. It was a synonym with the word weakness. You have a vulnerability. You have a vulnerability. Rather than when I think about the word vulnerability now and being vulnerable, that's something that as a child growing up, I could never identify with that because that was a weakness. Why would I identify with being weak? And when I step into the adult mind that I now have, this is my rational mind I'm talking about now. I think I have this synonym now. Instead of being weakness, it's now about openness. So vulnerability is openness, and it's not like it's opening a wound, Robyn. It's not like it needs to be that particularly raw, because some of the emotions, some of the things that I'm feeling, I'm very comfortable with feeling them because they enhance me, they allow me to grow and things like that. So it's not a raw wound vulnerability. It's it's that safe place vulnerability that you talked about. Uh, it's
And I
about
think also there's that, for me, another synonym, I have come to see vulnerability as strength because I think to be vulnerable, there's an element of I feel safe, I feel grounded, I feel stable in order to be able to share this deep truth of mine and to
mm,
trust you with it. But also knowing that you are not me. You're going to see it differently to how I see it. So your response to what I share with you will not be something I can control.
mm,
So, and that's not to say that we have to get to that point, but I think it's a journey to that point.
mm,
That's what my journey has been about, getting to that point where I feel actually I can be vulnerable. And I know that in that vulnerability, that is a strength of mine, but it's also I'm offering you a safe space because I'm prepared to open myself up. And like you say, openness again. So
mm,
not opening up of a wound, but opening up of a space,
mm,
opening up of a shared dialogue, connection.
mm. And you know, I had I have to say now, I had a wonderful childhood, great upbringing, uh, but I did feel in a way that I didn't feel comfortable being vulnerable in that way. I, as a family, we loved each other dearly. We still love each other dearly, but uh, we didn't share in a way I'm now happy to share. And maybe it's just the loading of years that has got me to that growth stage where I'm happy to open my mind and open my opinions for others without a sense of, oh my goodness, I don't want to be judged. And what happens if they don't like that? You know, to really to reach that space where you're happy to express the full function of you as a person without that fear of judgment.
And I
Uh,
think it's not just the family, though, is it? It's the society in which we live and the culture of that society or in
yeah,
which we work. Because I think you have a corporate background, I believe you said before.
that's right. Yeah.
And in the corporate and in, dare I say, in a lot of the masculine energy spaces in our world, then it is seen as a sign of weakness.
Mm,
Strength is not being vulnerable.
mm,
Strength and vulnerability are
mm,
not synonymous.
mm,
They're seen as opposites, at least
mm.
in our culture, within that environment. And I think that does corporates a disservice and it does the male of the population a
Mm,
disservice as well if they're not given that space and that permission.
mm,
It's okay to be vulnerable. Vulnerability can be a
mm,
strength.
mm.
It's sometimes seen more as a feminine trait,
It is.
whereas it doesn't need to be.
It is, and in a way, I'd like to see all those environments: the work environment, the family environment, the social environment, being seen as communities rather than, rather than separate and rather disparate entities where you need to perform in a different way. If we dealt with all of them, Robyn, as communities,
I love that word.
then I just immediately feel a more collegiate kind of warmth
It's
towards other
all of a
people I
sudden
share
it's
that community
connected.
with. Yeah.
Yeah, connected and collective
Mm,
rather than we're quite an individualistic culture
mm,
in the UK, generally speaking. And there is that African saying, if I'm right, it's something like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Because you've got the whole group. And we were, when we were hunter gatherers, and
mm,
genetically we're no different from our hunter gatherer distant
mm,
relations, we were designed to be together. We were designed to be in that
mm,
tribal collective where we all worked together and supported each other. And somebody might be an expert on where to find this particular kind of food, somebody else knew where to find something else. So we worked together and we supported the whole for the benefit of the whole. Whereas
mm.
quite often in our society, it's just what can I achieve? And I
Yeah,
need to be a certain level
and
or
it
better than somebody else or
it's
very competitive.
interesting that you point to that Englishness as being as sitting at the base of some of this. And I rather wonder, it's a challenge, Robyn, really, but I rather wonder how dissimilar it is in other countries, or whether, in fact, that perception that it's an Englishness is what I call the kind of the Coke bottle approach, where you look up to the world through the neck of the bottle. All you can see is what you can see, and yet those looking down at the bottles can see that the world is a very different place. So,
And I
uh,
think it was only that I can't speak for other cultures. I wouldn't
of
say it's
course,
a
okay,
British or English thing at all. I
yeah,
just would say that this is my experience. I can't really speak for what it's like in other countries.
yeah, yeah. I think that that is a an interesting way of re-looking at vulnerability from a societal point of view rather than an individual point of view.
Again, it's that conditioning and what permissions do we pick up? What
Yeah.
beliefs do we pick up as we are growing,
Mm,
from a young child towards adulthood, particularly in our younger years, because that's what influences us the most when we're
yes.
in that open state from 0 to 7ish,
Yeah.
and we just take everything in. We don't assess it. We don't say, this is what I want and this is not. We just take it all in like a sponge.
Mm, mm,
We're not so discerning maybe at that age. That comes later. But then if we're already colored, if our lenses are already a certain way, it takes
yeah.
us then to choose that I want to look at things differently,
Mm.
or I
Uh,
want to stretch it and explore.
Going back to the pure word vulnerability now, uh, and my own synonym, if you like, with openness. I think what I really value about vulnerability is that sense that you can uncover depth, because vulnerability opens depth in a way that I don't think anything else does in my mind. Because our worlds are full of nominalizations of words that have different meanings for everybody. And it's only through vulnerability that you actually reach a common platform where you can really connect. Because I do feel, and it goes back to what you were saying before, I do feel in many ways that we wander through life really quite disconnected with how others are feeling and how we're really feeling. Because the way we express this, the way we express our feelings, is often constrained by language,
Yeah.
even though our language is common.
But it's like you said, we have different meanings or nuances that we put on how we use our words. And although maybe we're all speaking English, we're all English speakers, certainly here on this podcast, but that doesn't mean to say that the person listening is getting the same message as the person speaking is intending to share.
Mm,
Because we're each listening through our own filters and
mm,
our own experiences of the world, which
mm.
colors everything that we take in, including what somebody else says.
So, how do we cut through this? How do we really have a common understanding within the boundaries of the language we're using uh, to really uncover that depth? What is the how do you do that? Because you must find yourself in this situation with clients where we all try and use clean language in order to get to this common sense of what the truth is. What other ways do you use, Robyn, to kind of uncover that truth and that vulnerability?
It's a fascinating one for me because I'm also trained interpreter. So language and words and messaging is a big part of what I have trained to do. And I think vulnerability is so huge in that process of getting to as close to a mutual understanding as we can,
Mm,
being able to say, actually, no, that's not what I meant, or I meant let me try to explain that again because I'm not sure that I'm being clear. Being able to lay ourselves open in front of others, that maybe even to say this is really difficult for me, or I've never explored how to put this in words before. Please bear with me while I do my best and maybe need to use a phrase from Brene Brown, circle back because it hasn't quite come across as I intended. But to keep that open space where we can constantly kind of offer and then take back and repair and offer again and
mm,
negotiate our understanding and reflect back. Well, I think you're saying this. Tell me, how does that land for you? Is that how you see it? Or would you then please tell me if you see things slightly differently?
mm,
Let's revise that so that I get a deeper, more rounded understanding. Also, with the proviso, the framing to say
mm,
words are understood differently, language is used differently. So that's okay. It's okay to go, I'm not sure that we're really understanding this. We're using the same words,
mm,
but we're maybe not coming at it from the same
mm. I
perspective.
think that's so true. That we try reframing that I know I do a lot with clients. It's almost like, you know, these were your words, but I'm not happy with those words. Let me put them in my words. And do you still agree that that's what you're talking about? But that's to me, when somebody's being vulnerable, that that takes away some of the power from them because they're expressing themselves in their own way. And I think the connection I find with clients is at an emotional level. What does this feel like? Don't give me the words. What does or give me the words and tell me what it feels like to give me those words.
Very down into the body.
Yeah.
Not like we were talking right at the beginning about too much cognitive,
Mm,
but come into the body. Tell me about your feelings. Some people really struggle with that if they haven't, again, they haven't explored how do I put my feelings into
mm,
words. And again, this is where different perspectives,
mm,
I might use one word and somebody else might have a completely different understanding or not relate to that word at all.
mm,
So again, this is where negotiation of, right, if I use this word, how does that land with you? What's your understanding
mm,
of how I'm using this word? Is that my
mm,
intention? Or, reflect back to me and I'll reflect back to you.
mm,
You might take a whole chunk of time just, can we get on a mutual understanding and as far as we possibly can with the restrictions of verbal language to, this is what I'm trying to say, is that what you're
mm,
understanding me to say?
mm. And sometimes I find abstraction is a real help in this.
Metaphor.
So I've had clients trying to express themselves in this way, and I've said to them, and it's quite jarring when you first hear it, but I said to them, if what you're trying to say to me was a color, what color would that be? And that's a reframe and a reset. And
And
it's,
challenges our thinking, doesn't it? And our
yeah,
expression.
it does. And that's a real powerful connection technique.
Sometimes also it interrupts in a very positive way.
Yeah.
So rather than we get stuck, don't we, sometimes on a loop.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not getting through that negotiation, if we're not moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
that's a really great tool, isn't it? Okay, so let's just reframe this. What would that be if it was a color? What would
Mm-hmm.
that be if it was an animal?
Mm-hmm.
What would
Exactly.
that be
Yeah.
if it was a piece of music?
Yeah. 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 And that's real freeing. That is finding a what's the word? It's befuddling to begin with because it kind of shakes your brain up and thinks, oh my god, what's he saying to me? How can I think in a color?
Discombobulating.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's a great word. Yeah, discombobulating. Uh, but it's it's freeing you from that groove, from that way, that narrow kind of focused way of thinking about this, and it just completely removes all of those. I remember when I was younger, and it has cropped up again later on in life, but I used to have a uh, it was a nightmare, I suppose. It was a fear-led nightmare that uh, I was in a very dark space with some kind of a demonic type fear or demonic type figure at the end of it. But the basis of the fear was that there was lots of darkness around and I didn't know where my boundaries were. So I'd put out my arms to feel the boundary, to feel where, to feel that there was some sense of this space was contained and that it had walls and it had, yeah, it was something I could, I suppose, metaphorically, something I could get my arms around, or something that I could conceptualize as a geographic and physical space. Uh, and without that, and I think that's the case with many fears that we can have. Without that sense of control, and that's what that is. That's what these boundaries, these walls are. It's control. Without that sense of control, it's pretty scary.
And I love the word you use there, containment, because if it isn't contained, it's limitless.
Yes.
It's huge. It's never
Yes.
ending.
Yeah.
Versus if it's that size and I know where the ends of it are,
Yeah.
then I know that it'll stop. I
Yeah.
can step outside of that, or if it's a fear, it's not going to follow
Yeah.
me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
There is a limit to it. So
And
yeah, that makes complete sense.
looking at the flip side of that and talking about potentiality, the same fear comes in
Yes.
because once clients begin to realize that the only constraint on them is them, what's going up here, what they've learnt as children, you know, once they realize that, then my goodness, the walls come down literally.
And
And
that's a very vulnerable place to
it
be.
is, it is very vulnerable place, but a place of immense growth. And
Yeah,
that,
because you can grow anywhere. You
yeah,
can expand, and realizing that you have that potential to
mm,
expand in whatever or every direction
mm.
that you want to.
And
So,
if the listeners, or if you have ever had that conversation with somebody who has realized that own potential and who has really grasped it, when you talk together, it's like you're on another planet, and the energy, you can feel the energy between you because you're reflecting each other and you're climbing in frequency all the time. And it's just the best and most uplifting feeling in the world. And I get that. And I get that. That's the reason why we started this podcast, because we felt that together. And, you know, if any of you listening out there are feeling this sense of energy, pure energy, yes, and please share that with us in the comments and explain what it is you're feeling as you're feeling it. That would be wonderful to hear from you about this. And as you play this back, because listening again is a really powerful tool, as you play this back, it might not have happened the first time, but when you really lean into it, when you really listen to the words you're hearing and the the feelings you're feeling, you might be surprised that it comes second or third time around. So please share, because it's all about, we're all about the impact that these conversations have with you. Please
the
share that with
connection,
us.
the connection that we're hoping this will offer and
Yeah,
create.
that's very true, Robyn. So I think that brings things nicely to a close this time. Robyn and I, goodness, Robyn, I could talk to you for forever, but you know, our listeners only have a finite amount of time for us. So until next time, thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you, and see you soon.
See you soon.